Now it's time for Culture Talk, where we talk about culturally relevant topics that you can use to start conversations about your faith. And I'm joined today with Justin Brierley. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sandra.
You're a wonderful author, speaker, and host of Unbelievable, a very popular show in the UK and around the world, really. And I'm so grateful to have you here for our 200th episode.
I feel honored.
I know. Well, you know what? The whole thing about 28:19, because people have asked, what does the show mean? And it's about Matthew 28:19. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations. And you are certainly a partner in ministry, making disciples of all nations across the pond and around the world. So I want to talk to you really about your mission work and what you're doing with Unbelievable and your brand, as it were.
Yeah.
So my first question really is, your approach with Unbelievable. You're incredibly winsome, and you face some pretty challenging conversations with skeptics and people of different beliefs. How do you remain so winsome in the face of those challenges?
It's funny because people quite often ask me a similar kind of question. They're like, if I was you and I was hearing those arguments, Justin, I'd be wanting to fight back, and I'd want to step in and, put my opinion across. And how do you remain so calm? And I don't know, maybe it's just I am just naturally kind of a slightly more laid back person, and I don't get too riled up when I hear opinions that might be offensive to other people. Who knows? But I guess at the core of it is I believe that Christian confidence is not about being able to demolish your opponent in an argument.
I love that.
Christian confidence is about being able to hear someone's argument, someone's objection, and to kind of be cool about it, and to not get frightened, not to get sometimes
Punchy.
there's this fight or flight response, isn't there? If people feel threatened by something, they either fight, and that you often see that in the internet sphere and social media, people just going for each other. You sometimes see it, sadly, in the Christian apologetics as well. It's all about winning an argument. Or there's the flight, people just run away from it, they duck it, they don't want to talk about it. And that's neither of those is the way we should be actually engaging with people. We should be confident enough to hear people's objections and then to just graciously engage them in a conversation about it. And really, the confidence, I think, that has come for me, especially through hosting over 15 years now of these conversations on Unbelievable, is just that after hearing so many objections to God, but also hearing great responses to those objections over the years, I've come to realize, look, we can cope with this. Christianity has been able to stand strong for 2,000 years against all kinds of attacks. This particular version of atheism or agnosticism or whatever it may be, it's just one more thing along the way. And we're just going to say, okay, tell me what you think, and let me engage with that. And it's almost, it's not that you ignore or dismiss their arguments, but that there's enough of an intellectual foundation there that that there's going to be something you can pull out, a tool, a resource. There's going to be an answer. Someone in Christian history will have thought of this question already. And so just being familiar with that, knowing enough of sort of some of the core reasons for Christianity, some of the particular reasons why faith makes sense, and then just being able to bring that into a civil conversation can be really good. It can be a really great way of then having a really fruitful conversation rather than a kind of argumentative kind of conversation. And so being winsome for me is just about being willing to listen, being willing to genuinely engage someone's questions, not go in to kind of win an argument, being willing to kind of take some blows, and not have to get the upper hand every time, but ultimately inviting them back and saying, let's have another talk about this, let's keep talking about this. And in the end, you'll find that the relationship really does make a difference to the way people then receive your own comments and arguments and that sort of thing.
And I think that's such a good point of thinking about the relationship and thinking about just resting in the fact that there's a long history of faith.
Yeah.
We don't have to get argumentative. We can listen, and that shouldn't be a novel concept, but it kind of is.
Yeah,
just listen at first, and then engage after that. So with all of these conversations that you've had, I'm sure you had some pretty challenging questions that have been posed at you. What have been some of the most challenging, and do some continue to remain a challenge?
Yeah. Oh, there's plenty of things that still remain quite mysterious to me, where I don't claim to have the answers to every question going. I was just dealing just the other day in a Q&A session with people asking hard questions about some Old Testament passages, warfare and violence in the Old Testament. That's tough stuff. I mean, I've got some ideas. I've got some things that I would put on the table as to how you would reconcile that with a God of love and the person of Jesus. But it's not an easy one. You know, no, I'm not going to go in and claim, you know, I've got the perfect answer to this. I think that's one area where, you know, I'm still learning. I'm still learning how do we best interpret those kinds of passages in the Old Testament. I've certainly had, you know, strong challenges to my faith over the years from some of the atheists and skeptics we've had on. I remember when I had Bart Ehrman on for the first time. He's quite a well-known skeptic of the New Testament. He's a historian, and he's, you know, written a lot of books challenging the historicity of the New Testament. And I remember when I first read one of his books in preparation for having him on the show, I was like, wow, this guy's got some good arguments here. You know, I'm wondering where this is going to go. But of course, when I invited one of the world's leading New Testament theologians from Cambridge to come on opposite him, you quickly learn, there's always two sides to every story. You know, the things that Bart Ehrman was painting as negatives, actually shown in a slightly different way, you understand actually there's some positives. And there's always that thing of for some people the glass is half empty, and for others the glass is half full. And sometimes when you hear both sides of the argument, suddenly it brings out the fact that actually there's always more to the story. And I found actually in the process of hosting those conversations on the historicity of the New Testament, I've come away with a much stronger faith actually in the reliability of those documents and in the things they say about Jesus' life, death and resurrection. And so for me, that's just one example of where, you know, I had to kind of go in there and take a few knocks and sort of, you know, it wasn't comfortable in the process, but actually sometimes that challenge, that time of testing actually builds a stronger faith in the end when you can come through it on the other side.
I have one last question. Now, when we think about the many conversations you've had, if someone were to come and say, hey, you know, what to you is the most powerful, most meaningful proof or point that shows that God exists, what would you say is most meaningful for you?
I think the most meaningful thing for me is that deep inside us, we all want there to be hope and purpose, okay? It's something that exists across all times and places and cultures, the idea that there is more to life than just the material facts of life, the things that we see around us. And the question is there an answer to that? Is there someone who meets that deep desire, that deep longing for hope, for purpose, for meaning? And what I've often found is that when you look at the materialist perspective, the naturalist atheist perspective, ultimately life is kind of a riddle, but it's not one with an answer. You know, it's an illusion, if anything. And one day, all of this will be gone. You know, the universe is gradually running out of energy. One day it'll all be a cold, sterile void, and that'll be the end of the story. In fact, there is no story on that. You know, all there is just the stuff that happens, and if it works out well for you, great. If it doesn't, too bad. But I don't think anyone really lives their life like that's the story that's true. People actually live their lives as though there is really hope, there is really meaning, there is really joy, there is really right, there is really wrong. And I find it's only in the person of Jesus Christ that all of that story makes sense, because he was the one who came to show us what love really is. You know, the psychologists tell us there's two things that humans need to lead a meaningful and flourishing life, and that is love and hope. And in his death on the cross, Jesus Christ showed us the most powerful expression of God's love that we could ever hope for. And in his resurrection, he showed us what true hope is, which is this life that goes beyond the grave. It's this meaning that goes on into eternity. So for me, the Christian story, you know, it encompasses all of those hopes and longings and fears. And for me, that's at the center of it all. That's what really fires me up. It's that we're part of something amazing, right. a bigger story, and we can just invite people to join in this amazing story that God is weaving through the whole of time and space and history.
All right. I love that, because you're pointing to a worldview that is very livable, because we do need to live in a space with love and hope.
We all need a story to live by.
Right.
You know, we live in a culture where people, I think, have kind of run out of stories to live by. They've been told that basically they're just part of a meaningless universe. You know, it's just running according to a kind of clockwork set of cause and effects. And that kind of makes people feel like, well, what's the point? You know, we have a mental health crisis Now, there's all kinds of reasons for that. But one of the reasons, I think, is people don't think there's any meaning to life. But actually, what we need is to introduce them again to the story to end all stories, which is the story of God coming in person and saying, you are worth everything, and I'm going to show you that. And that is the most exciting story you can be part of. And I think we're meaning-seeking creatures, we're story-driven creatures, and the Christian story is there for us, and it's a true story. And so we're all just invited to be part of that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that. If you want to hear more from Justin Brierley, go to justinbrierley.com.